Welcome to Emotions and Eating with Nicola Beer. Nicola controlled her feelings using food for 25 years, so she knows how draining it is to be constantly thinking about or acting out with food. Thankfully, having made an amazing breakthrough in her recovery, her mission became about helping others escape the unsatisfying cycle of frustration and self-medication with food. Nicola is determined to help you find your inner strength so you can be healthy, gain confidence, feel great, and be at peace with yourself and food.
Hi and welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I'm going to be sharing today about how to love your body. This is part 1 and we're going to focus on the food in this episode. Having established the importance of loving your body to love yourself, be happy and fulfilled, let's look at the actions you take that can demonstrate that you love your body. Now that we've accepted that our bodies have not done anything to us, in fact, we have hurt them. So the first is loving your body with nutritious foods. There are certain times of the year where we forget to look after our body's nutritional needs more than others, where our mind kicks in and we overindulge and we call it giving ourselves a treat. For our body, it most certainly is not a treat. Whether it's overloading on alcohol, high sugar foods, or unhealthy fats, or eating too much in volume, the body has to work on overdrive to break down, process, and eliminate all the unnatural products. Extreme overload or running on empty, if you have a purging or starvation pattern, harms the body, drains energy, and affects our mood. I used to make all sorts of excuses as to why I deserved unhealthy, high sugar foods. I'd say I'd work hard. I had some good news. I had some bad news. I had to cope with the financial stress. And that I deserved to treat myself to highly processed, sugary foods or plenty of wine. Mainly, the reason beneath these fake reasons was I felt bored, lonely, didn't know what to do with myself, needed to switch off from something going over in my mind, or worried about the future. So I gave myself a sugar fix, an insulin hike, every night. Sometimes, as I mentioned, this was with alcohol. Other times it was eating cakes, meant to be for 12 people, eating the whole thing, and sometimes eating 2 of them, or massively overdoing it with other high-carb food, bread, pasta, cereal, pumpkin, chickpea burgers, stuffing myself until I felt sick or was sick. And I've helped many people that have similar patterns and many people that have different patterns, where their food that they end up indulging on is deep fried food or heavy fat food instead of carbs. So what I realised is that in the end, treating myself is never a treat for my body, and therefore it's never really a treat for me. It's not a treat for my mind either, as after eating in this way, or drinking the sugar down repeatedly each night, or being sick, I felt guilty and irritated at myself. In fact, sometimes I felt so down and so annoyed at myself. I don't know if you've ever done this, but as soon as I'd eaten all of that and then been sick, I would get into bed and I would say to myself repeatedly, I hate you. Why have you done this? Why have you done this? I hate this. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And just really, really be so horrible and nasty to myself. And this is a horrible thing to do, to sleep on such low vibe energy after such negative words to yourself. So what does it mean to love your body physically and mentally? Well, I cannot offer you specific advice on what to eat and what not to eat, as it's unique to you. Everyone's food issues are unique to them and need to be specifically designed and worked out to suit the person. I will share briefly what helped me. And if you want to learn more, then do subscribe to the show to get more episodes, as I'm going to be sharing more about my journey coming up. Or visit my website and book a free peaceful eating session with me, where I can explain to you how I help people to become free from emotional eating or eating disorders, or just how to love their body through nutrition. For my sanity and health, loving my body involves avoiding foods that give me trouble. Everyone has different trigger foods, and whilst at times I could be triggered by any food, not any food starts the crazy food behaviour with me. The fact is that certain foods, once I eat them, set me off on a cycle of wanting more and more and more and more. And I find the craving uncontrollable, so I give in and end up eating way, way more than I planned or need. Then I'm burdened with guilt, anger at myself, and sometimes this made me want to be sick or lead me to be sick. And if I am sick, or whether I'm not even sick, either way, I end up feeling exhausted, dehydrated, and like a real loser. And if you feel like that, let me say you are not a loser. This is your way of coping with difficult times, and it may have become a habit. Or maybe you're still going through difficult times, and there is help available. Do reach out to me anytime, or do start asking for help from people that you love and you trust. And if I didn't actually be sick, what often would happen is I would then start planning in my head extreme diets or exercise, or mentally obsessing about what I had eaten. So loving myself and my body involves giving my body the nutrients I deserve, and in the early days, not giving myself anything that could lead me to a downward spiral. Healthy eating, according to your own definition, is the second part of loving your body. It's about learning from mistakes. I'm not making any recommendations here. Each person I support has a different way of creating change to their eating habits or drinking habits. Some have food plans and plan their food every day each morning. Others have rules and eliminate certain foods. Some email me what they eat daily so that I can hold them accountable. They email me in the morning, this is what I'm going to eat, Nicola, and then they email me at the end, this is how successful I was, so that they don't have to think about food for the rest of the day. Others, we create lists of foods. We have a black list, a grey list, and a white list. The black list is foods that caused that person trouble over the years, consistently. The grey list is foods that cause someone trouble occasionally, maybe once or twice a year. The white list is all the foods that person can eat and eat and eat without any trouble, without binging, without purging, without worrying, without guilt. Some really like the structure and routine, and others cannot stand it and like the spontaneity of just eating what they feel like, listening to their body from time to time. No one is wrong or right. It's about going with what is going to support you, your body, and your mind the most. So I'm going to share my journey to freedom in the hope that it may help you in some way. Please bear in mind that you might listen and reject this. You may hate this, or you may find it comforting even if you don't agree with what I did to become free. You may find it comforting because you're listening and you're hearing about someone else who has been where you are now or where you've been. So after years and years of wanting change but being unable to do it on my own, eating in moderation was impossible for me with certain foods. So I created a list of foods that caused me trouble. It was an eye-opening first step. Foods that no matter how much I tried with all my willpower to eat sensibly, it never happened. If I didn't binge on it that moment, it would be later on that day or the very next day. I'd be thinking about it, dreaming about it, craving it, wanting it, seeking it, focusing on it, obsessing about it. You see, it's not just about what you eat, it's also about the mental obsession that we want to become free of. For the foods on the blacklist, I couldn't work out whether the food was physically addictive or that I had emotionally charged the food with my minds and thinking. For example, chocolate. Once I start, I cannot stop eating it. I want to finish everything, whether it is a whole box of chocolate or something smaller, or even a whole chocolate cake. When I eat this way, I feel guilty and fear being fat and hating myself, so I make myself sick sometimes, or just feel terrible other times. Perhaps this is a physical addiction to sugar, or perhaps it's because I've told myself over the years to fear chocolate and that chocolate makes you fat. But I know it causes me trouble because, one, I cannot stop eating it once I've started, whether it's later that day or the next day. I obsess about having more of it, and when I've eaten it, I need to get rid of it. So for these 3 reasons, it harms me mentally, physically, and it also drains my energy and focus. I'm focusing on a food that I don't want to be focusing on. So for me, it's far easier to say to myself that this food gives me trouble, so by choice, I'm not going to have chocolate cake and chocolates in my house. And this doesn't mean that I can never have them again, but for me, having them in moderation, when left alone, hasn't worked for me. And believe me, I've tried and tested this time and time again. So for me, I found it easier to write a list of foods that, if I'm completely honest, give me trouble. Because it's much better to avoid having that one thing than have the battle, the fight, the urge, the obsession, the sickness after eating it. No amount of chocolate is worth that pain to me. So I don't feel deprived or unhappy. In fact, I feel free from that whole cycle. And the thing about creating lists is that we can change them anytime we like. As we get emotionally stronger and healthier, we might be able to eat those foods again, or we might not. Personally, I need to refrain from different foods until my cycles of binging, cycling and purging had stopped. Because I didn't want to think about or obsess about that food. And I found that actually what worked for me was putting them on a list that I don't eat, and then I feel free. That food no longer gives me trouble because it's no longer in my world. And I also made a white list. Now my white list is full of safe foods for me that I can eat time and time again without binging on them, without wanting to purge or starve myself because of the guilt. Also, these foods fill me up, give me the energy and make me feel great. And now I eat mainly from my white list, and it's grown massively over time. And the more I've created new recipes and discovered foods to add in it, I felt happier and freer. I also have a grey list. I'm unsure about whether sometimes it's the food that triggers me or sometimes that it does not. And this was in the beginning when I was starting out, and now I don't really have much of a grey list. But there were things on my list that when I'm in an emotionally good place I could eat them, and when I was not in an emotionally good place I couldn't eat them. But this is how I work with some people who like list writing, who want to give this a go. Now this may sound crazy or extreme to some, but for anyone that, like me, has suffered with binging, starving and purging for a long, long time, for anyone that's absolutely sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, then it's actually very beneficial. And for many it can be a dream come true to write these lists and follow these lists. For me, it kept me healthy, focused and free from emotional eating. And what we have to remind ourselves, or what I had to remind myself, is that obesity is a deadly disease. Bulimia is also a killer. Anorexia is one of the highest deaths for mental disorders. So giving up a bit of food, an item that causes you trouble, to save yourself from a life-threatening illness is nothing. And that's what I believe. You cannot put a price on feeling alive. But I will be honest with you, at first I had a massive resistance to writing lists and following guidelines. I thought, surely I can do this. I can eat everything in moderation. But over time, I learned that I kept making mistakes. and when I wanted to stop making them